Are you ready, live streamers? Live streamers? I don't know where to look at you, but somewhere. Alrighty, so we are going to hear now from another of the geeky ants who are behind all of this magic from the GeekConf. So everyone, please give a huge welcome to our next speaker, Shivraj! Woo! Yes, that's right. I hear you. I see you. Thank you. Woo, woo, woo!
Hey, hi everyone. Good evening. I'm Shivraj. I work as an engineer at GeekyAnts. And today I will be talking about TV app development with React Native. So yeah, before we begin, let me just quickly ask a question. How many of you build an application using React Native tvOS? Okay, not a lot. Okay, anyway, let's move on. Okay, so before we begin, let's just quickly have a look at what we'll be covering today. We'll discuss about some brief history of React Native for TV. We'll have a look at the current TV market. We'll also have a look in terms of why React Native could be a good choice for TV apps. And then we'll discuss about some key differences when it comes to TV app development and even mobile and web. Then we'll talk about some of the core components that are required for TV app development. We'll discuss about the navigation and interaction, how that works specifically for TV apps, and how it is different for web and mobile. And finally, we'll also discuss about some of the challenges or limitations when it comes to TV app development, and maybe some consideration in terms of how to optimize for that. Yeah, so let's get started then. Okay, so TV apps, React Native's journey for a TV app has been an interesting one. It all began in 2017 when Apple TV support came in for React Native with version 0.49. The following year, in 2018, Android TV support also came in. The bigger change came in 2020 when React Native's TV support was moved out and it was created as a React Native tvOS library. Then just last year in 2023, Hermes on Apple was also introduced. Then just this year, Expo SDK kind of started supporting TV app development. So with Expo SDK now we can build for TV, web, and mobile. So yeah, throughout this time we have seen some change. I mean, not significant, but we have been seeing some changes into the TV-specific features with React Native. Now let's look at the current market, what we have for TV. So before that, if you see here, there are a lot of devices and platforms when it comes to streaming media, right? When it comes to web, we can target all those with just a single app, maybe with React. And when it comes to mobile, obviously iOS and Android covers at least 95% of the OS market. And obviously we can cover that with React Native. But when it comes to TV, there are a lot of different platforms on OS that we have to support. Nothing like what we have for web and mobile. If you see here, some of the platform OS that we can see, Android TV, tvOS, there are web-based systems like Tizen for Samsung, or even WebOS for LG, and there's Roku, and there are a lot of many more that we have to support when it comes to streaming media with TV. So why React Native? Given the fragmented market that we have for TVs, why React Native could be a good choice? These are some of the reasons why we could consider React Native for TV app development. So let's imagine a streaming app, say something like Netflix or even Hotstar. So if you have to build an application for different platform OSs, you would have to have a lot of teams, right, to support these platforms. Or even when you consider mobile and web, again, you will have different teams working on that. You will have different code base. And to sync all those, to have the same specific features or even deploy them or sync the development or the deployment together, that will be very difficult, right? So here, React Native can help. I mean, if not all, but specifically few of the OSs or platform, it can help to target those. So given that, obviously, same as what we can do with React Native for mobile, we can obviously use the code for different platforms with React Native tvOS. Obviously, we can unify the development team using the same code base. And yeah, that would obviously create faster development cycle and also the deployment of it. And obviously, with the React Native experience that the developer have for mobile, we can leverage the same experience for TV development as well. So if you look at here, these are the platforms that we can target with React Native tvOS. Android TV, Apple TV, WebOS for LG, Tizen for Samsung. Both of these are web-based platform, so we can target those specifically not with React Native tvOS, but we can extend React Native web to support that, and obviously Fire TV because it's just an extension of Android TV. So now that I've looked at why React Native could be a good choice, let's look at some of the key differences of TV apps from mobile and web. So the biggest difference that we could see with TV is the user interface, right? Obviously the screen size that we have for TVs and obviously the distance through which we watch TV apps, right? So that's the biggest difference, and also the navigation, how it works. In mobile, we use something like touch. We can just see what we want to interact with, and we can just touch those elements in the mobile. And same goes for web. We can just interact with them very easily by just moving our mouse cursor and also maybe keyboard interactions. But with TV, it's completely different. We have to interact with them with TV remotes, right? So yeah, that's a couple of major differences. Obviously, the interaction that happens so remote. There's another major difference, that's hardware limitation, which we have for TVs. This we'll talk about later in the slides. So let's look at these aspects one by one. So yeah, talking about the user interface for TV app, these are some of the major core components that we use. So the draw component, which is majorly used for navigation. You usually see this in most of the application as the entry point where we interact with them, where we kind of navigate through different screens or different elements of the components or the TV, right? And then there's grid. This is majorly for displaying the content, majorly the layout of the content that we see as soon as we land into the application. Then obviously cards to showcase individual items, let's say the movies, the shows, or the categories itself. And these are the components that we mostly interact with or navigate through. And then there's obviously the buttons, which are for interaction and selections. And also, there could be some platform-specific components, which maybe we can use it as native components, maybe like something like video player or audio player. So yeah, most of these components are basically UI components, right? So we can use libraries like GlueStack UI, Atomic UI, to create these components. Obviously, these libraries are universal and are very responsive as well. And obviously, this comes with a lot of customizability, right? So we can use these libraries or something like other libraries similar to these to target the UI components for TV app. And obviously, we can create our own components and use it for TV apps. Now, let's look at how navigation and interaction works in TV apps. So if you look at here, majorly the navigation and interaction in TV apps are handled by, obviously, the user inputs, which happens to be by remote controls. And there's app navigation, which I already mentioned, like it's like through the content that we see in the main screen, right? It could be horizontal, vertical, through the remote controls. We just click on left, right, up, down, right? We just navigate through that. And the major function that happens there is focus management, which is very crucial for TV, a good TV experience, and very tricky to handle as well with when it comes to TV. Let's deep dive into each of these aspects to have a look in terms of how these works. So in TV primarily, obviously it relies on remote controls where we click on those buttons, click on those buttons to interact with each element. Obviously, when it comes to mobile, we can just see each element and just click on those elements by tapping on it, and we can interact with those components or navigate through different screens. And when it comes to web, we can just move our mouse cursor and click on it as you visually see those components as well, right? But when it comes to TV, we have to kind of click on the remote controls. We are not sure whether it is moving in which direction in terms of like visually we can't understand where it is going, right? So that has to be handled. So that is handled with TV event handler component. And if you see the code here, so depending on the event, like left, right, up, down, I mean, even play and pause, the TV event handler component listens to the event that are happening through the remote and handles it depending on how we want to. The back handler component of the API that we had for Android earlier, right? The hardware button, that same API also works with Android TV and Apple TV to handle the same thing for back, I mean, with the menu button or the back button as well. Next, we'll talk about app navigation. So for TV apps, we often see, I mean, grid view, which are two-dimensional. As I mentioned, I mean, we just can move into multiple direction where up and down or left, right. So that is something called spatial navigation. So usually, this is the layout that we see in the TV apps, something like, I mean, the interaction that happens through the remote control in both the direction, and we interact with those components. If you look at here, I mean, this is majorly the layout that we see in most of the applications. Depending on the remote control inputs from the user, we navigate between those items in the screens, right, in different direction. So if you closely look in this video, the elements that are selected are also focused, right? And if you see on the left of the screen, you see a drawer, which I mentioned earlier, is one of the core components as well. So if you see on click of those elements on the drawer as well, the grid or the content that we see on the middle of the screen are also changing, right? And if you see the content as well, depending on the focus or the selection of it, the top element that we see is again also changing, right? So that's where, I mean, we usually see the player or the banner of something we want to kind of select as, right? So that's majorly the place where we put in our banners or players, all those things. So if you see here, I mean, we are able to see the focus on the elements or visualize that, OK, this is the element that has been selected. So how is this handled? So this is handled by something called focus management. OK, so this is very critical, as I mentioned, and it is very tricky to handle as well. So if you see in this video, as we interact with the remote, on the right of the screen, if you see, like, on click of, I mean, on tap of the buttons on the remote, like left, right, the movement of the focus is also moving, right? It does not matter whether the element is directly adjacent to it or it's on the same layout as a like same column or the same row. We are able to interact with each element on the screen depending on how it is structured, whether it is adjacent or not. And that's majorly handled by TV Focus Guide V component, which is provided by React Native tvOS API. Okay, so this is how it works. So essentially, it's an invisible view which we can place just to interact with elements which may not be adjacent to each other. It can be used as well as like when you want to skip an element as well, right? So it acts as a component where we could like focus on that depending on how the adjacent elements or how the placement of the components are there. It is very tricky. I mean, the focus management is very tricky to handle in TV applications. And yeah, so TV Focus Guide View is a very powerful tool to achieving focus management in TV apps. Next aspect that we'll be considering, as I mentioned, is hardware. So, I mean, we are in the era where mobiles and laptops have 16 GB, 32 GB of RAM. And these are very common nowadays, right? But with TVs, the RAM has always been low for a long time now. And we always see the processors that we are using for TVs are also older. And that's the biggest limitation that we have with TV apps. And also, considering these things, we still have to optimize for the TV apps so that the experience is smoother. I mean, obviously, people want to watch content, not just interact with the TV, with the elements that we see, right? The performance has to be better. So yeah, that are some of the limitations And obviously, there could be some platform-specific limitation as well, right? With React Native, as I mentioned earlier, we can just support few of those platforms. We cannot target all the platforms, so there's, again, a limitation with React Native. Obviously, we can build with platform-specific code base, but yeah, React Native has that limitation that we can just support few of those. So yeah, that covers most of the aspect that we wanted to consider building for TV apps. Now, look at some challenges that we might face when developing TV app with React Native. So yeah, as I mentioned, handling focus management across platform is very challenging. Obviously, we have different guidelines for maybe Android TV or Apple TV, and there's, again, different guidelines for web-based application as well. So dealing with that and handling focus management consistently throughout different platforms is a very, challenging part. Then again, different platform-specific guidelines, as I mentioned, could be tricky as well. Handling the layout differently, maybe depending on the guidelines for different OS of different platforms is again challenging. So yeah, and as I mentioned, working with the hardware limitation and optimizing for that is a bigger challenge. Then there's a limited capability when handling background tasks with React Native itself, and with React Native OS, that remains the same. We have some limitation there as well. So yeah, now that we have talked about some of the limitations and also some of the challenges when we're building TV apps with React Native tvOS, let's look into some of the consideration in terms of how we can optimize for that, or how we can optimize for some performance when we are building for TV apps. So one of, great library that we can use, which majorly focuses on navigation, focus management, for key smooth experience with React Native tvOS is React TV Space Navigation. This library tackles focus management and navigation very smoothly, and across multiple different platforms. And yeah, if you see here in the video, the elements that we're interacting with, it has some kind of animation as well, and it is being handled very smoothly. So most crucial part of the application, which is navigation and focus management, and again, when it comes to navigation with animation, is being handled with this library, and it is very smooth. And this library also comes with few components of the APIs which handles list data as well. So there's something called spatial navigation virtualized list, and there are a couple of more depending on the layout that you want to build for TV app. So this handles rendering large data very smoothly, and it automatically handles focus management as well. So although, flat list is there, which works fine, but you all know, with flat list, there could be some limitation where we're handling large data. So yeah, having these APIs which handles the data very smoothly and renders able to render the large data very smoothly is something that can help. And if you see the matrix here, it outperforms the flat list anyway. So yeah, that's good to have. And if you look at the example code, the syntax that it has is very similar to flat list. So you don't have to worry about learning a different component altogether. And just to mention, flash list also works. So yeah, we can give that a try, but yeah, that's something to mention. So considering all the limitations and even the hardware limitations, we have to optimize for TV app when we are building with React Native tvOS. We will have to consider something like memory usage, CPU usage, or even the load time when it comes to building the TV app, right? Obviously, that's majorly because of the limitation that we have with the hardware. But yeah, we'll have to consider that. Either we are creating with React Native or any language, platform-specific language as well, but we have to consider that. And with the recent React Native new architecture and the support with suspense, concurrent mode, all these helps in terms of optimizing the performance for building TV apps, giving a smoother experience to the user when creating an application for TV. And obviously, not just that, we can obviously consider to build few of the stuff on the native layer as well. That's always handy. Something like video player, I mean, that could be very specific, but it can be handled differently for different platforms. Yeah, so before I wrap up, I have a, quick demo. Yeah, let me just play that. I just created this in a couple of hours. I didn't handle the optimization part, so yeah. If you see here, the optimization part is not working well because the video is, kind of laggy in terms of when it shows up. So that is something that we can work on. Yeah, before I wrap up, a few things to mention. We recently had, as I mentioned, Expo SDK supports TV app development now, so we can use the same code base for mobile, web, and TV. Now with the Expo SDK 51, Expo Router is also supported for TV app development. Then we have a boilerplate code from Ignite as well, which works. We can use that to bootstrap our project for TV app development. Then React Native IAP, which is for in-app purchase, that also works with React Native tvOS so that we can target for Apple TV or Android TV and even Amazon Store for building an app. And yeah, for testing, we can obviously use APM, which works perfectly fine with React Native tvOS as well. And yeah, we are seeing, not completely fast growth, but we are seeing some kind of growth in terms of the React Native tvOS space. So yeah, recently we have seen some development over there, so we could expect a lot of resources and talks over that could be coming in. Yeah, so yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good evening.